Here is a dubstep growl. Besides sounding like a robot about to throw up, it's a complex sound. What sort of mini wizard did they put inside computers to turn ones and zeros into this? I have explained how sound works in another video, but if you didn't watch that, don't worry, I'll do it again. Just know that you are now officially on the hate list. Think of the air like a ball pit inside a wave pool.
Huh?
Don't worry, it'll make sense, I promise. Usually, the balls are evenly spread out, but pushing the water might make the balls concentrate more in one spot while others have fewer balls. That's a difference in pressure, which eventually gets to your ears, that sound. That difference can be used in a graph to make shapes like this one called a sound wave. Like a big meal, your computer doesn't want to deal with all that, so it's going to cut it into tiny pieces we call samples. If you know the concept of frames per second, this might sound familiar. Usually 24 images or frames per second is pretty convincing to your eyes, but our ears require a lot more. If you're old and dying, you may remember CDs. For CD quality audio, a single second of sound is cut into 44,100 samples. Now the computer can know how loud each sample is based on how tall that part of the graph is. So now it can assign a number based on that loudness. You might have heard of 16-bit or 24-bit audio. Well, here's where that is important. You may not have a huge wang because you don't know how binary works, but don't be scared. I'll teach you and you'll be a tripod in no time. Each number in this sequence is called a binary digit, or bit if you don't have time for 2 words. Every one of these represents a power of 2. If you sum up all the places where the ones are, you have the number that this is in a tiny pin system. But the computer also has to know if this is a negative or not. So how does he know that? Usually, the leftmost bit represents if the number is a negative, but also the rules to reading those negative numbers are different. First, we invert the number we are looking for and we read the zeros. Then, after doing that sum, we add 1 and just put a minus in front of it. Congrats on your new massive dong. To be brief, more bits and samples means bigger up and down numbers, more resolution, quality gooder.
Hold on.
I hear you asking like a dum-dum.
Why would the computer need to know if it's a negative? You can have -1 air particles.
Well, the air particles I mentioned have a standard distance used for reference between them. The computer needs to know if that distance in the sample is smaller, aka higher pressure, or larger, aka lower pressure, than the reference.
And why is that important?
Because your speaker is going to recreate that pressure by getting freaky and pushing air out and pulling it in. So those ones and zeros are sent to a chip known as the DAC, which stands for Digital to Analog Converter, that converts it into voltage. That voltage then drives your speaker to play the sound. But if you heard any Beatles song, you know that the left and right speakers can play slightly different things. Your computer stores both audios in one file and alternates between them, just going, this goes right, this goes left, this goes right, this goes left.
But what about surround sound systems?
What do you think, Sherlock? They have a similar structure. Left, right, center, subwoofer, back left, back right, and on and on and on. That's why the options of surround sound are 5.1 and 7.1. They have 5 or 7 speakers and also a subwoofer, because the guy who named them didn't like bass. If you play a basic-ass cringe audio file, the surround sound system usually just tricks you with volumes and isolating frequencies like this. But let's go even further beyond. How does a speaker even play sound? The answer is, the people that designed this never touched grass and knew way too much about physics. Here are the parts of a speaker. The cone or diaphragm is the part that pushes and pulls the air to make the sound, but it does so with the help of its soaking buddies, the voice coil and the magnet. The voltage flows through the voice coil. The direction depends on if the number sent to the DAC was negative or positive. That in turn changes how the coil interacts with the magnet. Positive values push it out and negative values pull it in. Speaking of sexual innuendos, a usually phallic microphone works in the same way. However, there are a couple of differences depending on the type of microphone. A dynamic microphone has a diaphragm, which in this case is a thin sheet that reacts to air. A voice coil is attached to that, and both sit in a magnetic field created by a magnet. When the thin sheet moves, the coil moves with it inside of the field, and that generates voltage because physics. In a condenser microphone, that diaphragm is one plate of a larger component called a capacitor. What you need to know about capacitors is that, when powered, the distance between their plates changes the voltage across the capacitor. So the logic here is similar. The movement of that plate produces a varying voltage. And of course, in either case, that voltage is going to be sent to an ADC, an analog to digital converter, unless you're a dumbass that plays League of Legends. So that's how the crisp sound of that gameplay channel gets captured into numbers, and how those numbers get turned into the audio version of a bomb. Now, this video doesn't cover some real nerd shit, but if you want me to talk about it, just leave a comment because I'm not a psychic. Anyways, this took a ton of effort to make, so click one of the buttons below because I need the serotonin. Have a good one.